I started the planning for Potential Future Crisis worksheet by reviewing what I wrote down about my last suicidal crisis on the Understanding Your Suicide Risk Curve worksheet from Session 2. The crisis happened about 4 months ago after a nasty argument with my wife. For triggers, I had written down that I had had a recent visit with my pain doctor, where she told me that there wasn't any kind of surgery that they could do that would fix my chronic back pain. I also had just learned that a good friend of mine from the Navy had died suddenly of a heart attack. When I learned he had died, I felt guilty for not reaching out earlier. I also started thinking that all of my friends are dying and there's nothing I can do about it. And for warning signs, I had not been answering my phone. I usually like talking to people on the phone, but when I get into that headspace, I stop taking calls because I just don't feel up to it. I also had not been sleeping well or going for my usual walks. Then I followed the workbook instructions and tried to come up with skills that I could use in the future to respond to these types of situations, triggers, and warning signs. For what to do if a situation like this happens again, I wrote down that if I get bad news about someone dying or bad news about my health, then I will start using my 3 C's worksheet again at least 3 times a week to try to catch automatic thoughts like, all of my friends are dying, or my health problems are making me a useless person. I wrote down that if I were to use this skill more often, I think it would help me to not allow my thoughts to spiral out of control like they've done before. I wrote down that if I were to use this skill more often, I think it would help me not to allow my thoughts to spiral out of control like they've done before. For what to do if I notice these warning signs, I'm going to use my activity scheduling skill to come up with a temporary schedule that I follow to help me get back on track with sleeping and eating well. I also wrote down that if I notice that I'm starting to avoid answering people's calls, then I'm going to do an ITCH problem-solving worksheet to come up with solutions for how I can keep answering phone calls and avoid isolating. Then I'll follow up with testing those solutions by following the instructions on the ITCH problem-solving worksheet. I wrote down that if I were to use these skills, I think it'd help me to get back to my normal routine rather than letting this bump on the trail consume me. And I think using the ITCH worksheet would help me get out of my head about answering phone calls and encourage me to stay connected with people. These steps could really help prevent the crisis from getting worse.